Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment manages to find exciting stories to tell as a Tears of the Kingdom prequel, with Princess Zelda taking the lead to spend plenty of time with some all-timer characters, old and new. But while action and performance is an upgrade from the last Hyrule Warriors, strangled battlefields and mission designs become dull, holding this back from true magic. Age of Imprisonment shows it's Zelda's era, and we're just living it. Not only did the titular princess take over from the green-garbed hero Link in the top-down The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom last year, she's back to do it again in this lavish prequel to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, where Echoes highlighted her book smarts with a copy wand to solve puzzles. Here in Age of Imprisonment, she's handed a light-powered beam saber and told to get slicing. Following some accidental time travel shenanigans at the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom, Princess Zelda spends most of that game benched back in the past, Link uncovering the mystery around what happened to her by tracking down collectible flashbacks. In Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, we get to live that history, as Zelda links up with the founding rulers of Hyrule as they forge alliances with neighboring clans and take on the might of the evil Ganondorf, whose malevolent power is responsible for the later threats throughout both those main Switch games. It's a similar setup to predecessor Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which told an alternate history of a different conflict closer in the timeline to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Age of Imprisonment, however, goes to efforts to stay canon. Age of Imprisonment sometimes struggles with this setup though. The premise will mostly appeal to those who've already played Tears of the Kingdom, but having to stick to showing those same events playing out over a greater span of time makes story beats predictable. But it's also the game's greatest strength. Characters like King Ralru and his inventor sister Mineru were incredible yet all too brief parts of Tears of the Kingdom. Getting to see Zelda hang out with them and form bonds over many hours is fantastic, like meeting old friends. Age of Imprisonment expands on the lore we know from Tears of the Kingdom, the awakening of dangerous ancient humanoid constructs, and new fiends summoned by Ganondorf to scrap with. These new story elements have a vibe of when a long-running anime series would have a movie released in the thousands. A vaguely filler feeling where new adventures are had, but by design, can't have consequences that have too much impact on the grander narrative. I actually really like that for Age of Imprisonment. Nintendo has crafted a magnificent world across Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and getting the space to explore that further is appealing. But not every aspect of this particular age of Hylian history stacks up. The historical sage heroes of Age of Imprisonment feel a bit sourceless compared to Age of Calamity's champions. Tears of the Kingdom just didn't build out its glimpses into the past to the same degree as Breath of the Wild did, and as a result, it's hard to feel the same affection to every historical figure we meet in this fantasy world, and Age of Imprisonment doesn't change that. Bird-like Rito warrior Rafika will never be the sassy Prince Rivali, and having every sage play similarly to their champion counterparts doesn't do much to avoid comparison. Newcomers make up for that though. Kalamo, a traveling Korok with a jaunty hat, has instantly become one of my favorite Zelda characters ever. Part of the story sees Zelda and the sages doing battle in some arenas, while Kalamo meets up with less important characters across each fantasy race, while undertaking his own journey. These could risk feelings like roster fillers, but even though they're less detailed, I really like these additional characters. Lego, for instance, is an older, battle-hardened Zora, who stands apart from his much younger Sage Queen. There's a neat sense of how these regular warriors need to give it their all to go toe-to-toe with hordes of demonic creatures. While story matters a lot in a Zelda game, for a Warriors game it's all about the combat. Mashing out flashy combos that sends hordes of enemies tumbling at once, flashing up increasingly large numbers on screen. The power of the Switch 2 is well utilized to deliver on this spectacle, smoothly translating the art style into battlefields absolutely laden with enemies to give a clobbering, from Bokoblins to Gibdo and even Keese. Just about every foe from the main Zelda games is present to thwack. The brutal frame rate slowdowns that plagued Age of Calamity, like Zelda, have been banished to the past. Swapping between a party of heroes using the D-pad, you can even jump between points on the battlefield almost instantly, with smarter AI meaning your other party members usually go right where you'd want them to, without needing to be manually commanded. Though you can still do that if you wish. Characters play similarly enough to make swapping between them on the fly easy. All combos are a succession of light attacks, with you picking where to use a heavy attack to initiate a bigger finishing move. Some combo branches, depending on hero or weapon type, can have extra button presses or holds. You can dodge, sprint, block, all the usual stuff. The action feels snappy and satisfying, and yes, you can even join up with a friend to sow destruction together. Special attacks and Zonai gadgets replace Age of Calamity's power wheel, with the gadgets in particular being a great way for Age of Imprisonment to tip its green hood to Tears of the Kingdom's building mechanic. There's no actual assembling, though Mineru's combos are all based around her using auto-build devices, which is great fun in action, but you can pull out flamethrowers, fans, bombs, and the like from your pockets, expending a rechargeable battery as you do. With elemental weaknesses, these add a nice dynamic to skirmishes, hosing down sludge-covered enemies or blowing off stone armor with explosives. The big disappointment, however, is in the battles rather than the combat itself. Across main missions and oodles of side quests, they all feel extremely straightforward and linear. Many missions only take place in small slithers of battlefields, and the ones in the bigger areas shuffle you quite cleanly from point to point. There's very little sense of scope to any of the environments, instead feeling just like corridors and rooms. This is present just about everywhere you fight in Hyrule, but it's felt most in sections set in the sky or depths, both new zones from Tears of the Kingdom, which feel very underutilized as spaces to play in. Outside of maybe one wooded area, I'm struggling to remember the shape of many of the spaces I've just spent tens of hours fighting through, while I can clearly conjure up the battlefields across the very original Hyrule Warriors and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Age of Calamity had a range of diverse and interestingly shaped maps, but Age of Imprisonments just feel really bland in comparison. Revisiting Age of Calamity alongside this new one, I had way more fun fighting back through even early encounters there. I'm not a fan of how oversimplified Age of Imprisonment spaces feel to move through at all, and I'm not sure why the approach has shifted. Development has been led by the newly formed AAA studio this time, but like Omega Force, that's an internal Koei Tecmo studio, so it shouldn't feel all that different. Likewise, the replacement for Age of Calamity's Divine Beast sections doesn't really hold up. In Age of Imprisonment, these are rudimentary arcade shooter sections that involve scooping up Zonai gadgets to power up different shot types. It's not like the Divine Beast moments were meticulous bits of design, where you'd get in a giant war machine to level armies, but they did a better job of setting a sense of scale, acting as a climactic reward after battling it out on the ground. These shooter sections are fine, but just feel like a minigame, with little connection to Age of Imprisonment's main action. It's a shame, as there's an awful lot to like about Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, especially for a series fan like me. Zelda is fantastic as a series lead, effortlessly pulling together narrative threads and elevating even some fairly bland characters with her presence, while newcomers like Calamo and company offer enough new to spark interest. But while action and performance are a step up, the mission design being so lacking is a huge issue for a Warriors game like this. While Age of Calamity is missing feature additions I do appreciate in Age of Imprisonment, it does now run a lot better on Switch 2 hardware than it did on the original. I've had more fun playing through that one than playing through its successor. They did call it Age of Imprisonment, I suppose, but I wish they'd let me off the leash a little. Zelda's beam sword hungers for more. We give Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment 3 stars out of 5. So, will you be diving into Age of Imprisonment? Are you a Warriors veteran, Hyrule or otherwise? Or will this be your first foray into battle? Let us know and stick with GamesRadar for the latest on the greatest games.